But yeah, let's get going. I'm not in Frankfurt normally. I'm just on my way from San Francisco back to Finland, and I managed to have a layover here so that I could participate in this webinar. And yes, my name is Sami Hiro. I'm the new CEO for Ellie. So I've been here. I'm looking at the clock, so a month and a half essentially. But I have a lengthy experience on data products, enterprise data platforms, and even one of the early ETL tools from the late 90s, early 2000s. So I'm kind of coming back to my roots with this new position. And I'm here today with a couple of my colleagues. So Sam is one of our marketing people. Johannes, you may already know his name. He's one of the founders from back 2018, 2019 when the company was founded. And of course, Stan, who is our product strategy person who is going to explain a little bit more about what's new with Ellie and show a couple of really cool demos, because seeing is always believing. So we'll head to that. But thank you so much for taking the time and joining us today. We are going to cover some of the latest developments that the product has. And if you are users already, obviously you know that our mission has been to essentially expose modeling for kind of everybody, whether you are in IT or business, and particularly creating the common understanding on what the requirements tend to be. And why we're doing that and really so focused on it, it still is that a lot of these projects tend to fail. If we're looking at the various data-related projects, particularly AI and ML related things, a lot of those don't end up in production because of data issues. Enterprise data platforms, I think Gartner at one point said that 80 to 85% of those projects fail or fail to deliver on the business case. And one of the big reasons behind it is that that there was kind of a lost in translation between the IT teams and the business teams. And even within the business, we don't always know what we mean when we talk about things, concepts like line of business or product or customer. Sometimes we kind of go a little bit off because we all have our subjective perspective on what the concepts are and how they interact with other topics like entities and within domains and so forth. But anyways, so that's what we are all about. And I'll pop in at the very end to kind of talk a little bit about where we are headed purely strategically, because we have some really interesting developments coming, particularly in the areas of AI and connectivity. But I'm going to let Stan take over for a little while now, and then I'll come back right before Q&A, and then we'll continue with that.
All right. Thanks, Sami, for the intro for the session. And hello, everybody, and thank you for joining today's webinar. I'll be going today for the product, and we will have a QA session at the end of the webinar where you'll be able to, I'll be able to answer your questions. And if you have any questions during the session, just feel free to add them to the chat, and we will go through them at the end of the webinar. Without further ado, I'm going to share my screen, and we will start the session. All right, and I guess my screen is now visible. Cool. So maybe before we start, just shortly about me. So I've been in the company for the last 2.5 years. I started in marketing, but now I lead a lot of our product things, whether it's prototyping and testing all the latest things available with AI, LLMs, etc. And I also work with our enterprise team that focuses on enterprise functionality. Overall, I'm a big geek all things AI, and I've been in the data space for over 5 years, whether it's embedded, cloud, etc. And today's agenda is we're going to go through our full modeling workflow, showcasing all of the latest features now available in Ellie. We'll also show you some sneak peeks of the things we're building in the future with our reverse engineering workflow with synthetic metadata. And then we'll also go a bit for our current roadmap, so you are also aware of the features coming in the coming months. But maybe before we go through the product a bit, the demos itself, just let's kind of shortly recap what is Ellie all about. So while at the core, Ellie is a data modeling tool, we always want to think a bit bigger about it and how we position ourselves. It's a product design and collaboration platform for data teams. And the goal was always the same. We wanted to build something really easy to use, something as easy as Miro or Lucidchart or Visio or Draw.io, some of these easy collaboration tools that business people love, but at the same time with the technical functionality you would see in more data-focused tools, whether it's data modeling tools, catalogs in some cases, etc. It's easy to use, runs in the cloud, and we're bringing more and more integrations to the tool. And kind of our overall approach, which kind of shifted over the years, is that we're trying to let our users work with data in a couple of ways. You can always start top down with your domain experts, find common understanding, agree on terms, definitions, and create your initial designs, kind of like conceptual data models. But you can also approach Ellie from the technical perspective first. This really depends on the strength within your organization. You can, for example, bring things from your warehouses by reverse engineering your schemas as physical models. If you have already existing knowledge in other tools, like a data catalog like Purview, you can bring these glossaries into Ellie and start modeling with them. And kind of our overall always message is that you always need to find common ground between these two approaches, because you need to look at, okay, this is what the business wants, but also you need to see this is the data we actually have, and you need to find the common ground of what you can actually do with the data available. And our overall goal, as Sami mentioned as well, is to create this common understanding across your data workflows. And the way we're doing that is by making the tool very easy and customizable for our enterprises, bringing lots of integrations to support your workflows. This year, we've been working a lot on experimenting and bringing to our customers AI functionality, so AI agents that enable some of the workflows, and by making assets across the whole Ellie environment reusable. So if something already exists, you can easily find it and reuse it instead of creating a new thing, creating duplication of assets. And as I mentioned, we're building more and more integrations to the tool. We added some data catalogs already and are working on some like Colibra right now. There's forward engineering and overall data engineering tools that we support. We're adding more and more warehouses with which you can work directly with Ellie. There's version control. And I'll show you a sneak peek of some of the source systems we're going to support in the coming months, but there's going to be over 150 different source systems, some modern, some legacy, that you'll be able to use with the tool. And kind of overall, as a recap, I think when I joined the company 2.5 years ago, we were mainly focusing on conceptual modeling. We then added logical modeling. Now we have physical modeling. We're building integrations, and kind of Ellie lets you do way more than ever before. And it's growing, and I'm excited to see how our product evolves over the years to come. So let's start, as promised, with the full modeling workflow as a first demo. And kind of the idea is to show you how you can start with your domain experts, look at the business context you already have, create your conceptual models, move to logical, physical, and at the end of the day, create actual structures in your warehouse. So create tables in your warehouse, all following the workflow. The overall overview of what we're going to do is we're going to first organize our Ellie environment. We'll then bring terms from a data catalog that we could use within our models. We'll then create a conceptual model, but we'll ask a bit AI for help to help us create a model. We'll then create logical and physical table designs within Ellie, push it to version control, create the tables in the warehouse, and then we'll bring the actual implementation that was in the end created in the warehouse back into Ellie, creating a full workflow in the tool. First, we're gonna organize our environment, and a great feature that we added recently to Ellie that enables this is folders and subglossaries. So now in Ellie, you can structure your organization by having folders and subfolders. Each folder can have its own glossary, and you can kind of organize your work the way that works for your organization, whether it's by having domains and subdomains, maybe having a folder that is a glossary for your enterprise glossary. You can have a folder for a data product, etc. And you can kind of now organize the way you want to use Ellie that fits specifically for your organization. We also added a support for multiple glossaries. So now each folder can have its own glossary. And you can use entities from different glossaries within your model. So you can borrow foreign entities. So even if you don't have right access to edit a certain definition, you can still use the entity within your model. So maybe we can go into an environment and I can show you how you could organize your Ellie environment with folders. So I created this imaginary organization Acme, and this is my Acme environment. So here you can see I have my organization folder. Maybe I'll zoom in so you can see a bit better. And in it, I have organized my organization by domains. So we have finance, HR, legal, logistics, production, sales and marketing, and technology and systems. And I also created a folder called Enterprise Glossary. The idea of this folder is that essentially nobody can edit it except for admins. And this information actually comes from a data catalog. And I'll show you how I did it in a sec. And then within our folders, we can then organize different models for specific domains. So for example, today we'll focus on logistics, but let me show you, for example, how a sales domain could look, sales and marketing domain. So we have a folder called sales and marketing, in which we have marketing and sales as separate subdomains in which we can continue our work. We can limit who has write access to these folders and subfolders. So in this case, we only added the sales and marketing team experts. And then, of course, in each folder, you can have subfolders. You can add all types of models you want, and you can also have your own glossary. And a model in an Ellie folder would look something like this. You're probably familiar with this. And as I mentioned, now, because of the change that we have subglossaries, you can now use entities from other glossaries. So if I would use an entity, let's say warehouse, I can see that there is an entity currently available in our logistics glossary called warehouse. And if I add it to the model, it will show in a bit italic font, indicating that it's a borrowed entity, foreign entity from another glossary. Because I'm an admin, I have access to this entity and I can make edits I want. But if I don't, I will still be able to use it even though I cannot make any modifications. And that's kind of the step one you would probably want to do in your Ellie environment, right? You want to organize the workflows around your domains, around specific projects, and make sure that people know exactly where to work for their specific tasks. But once you're done with that, the next thing you could do is, as I mentioned, we support subglossaries. You could start populating your glossaries, not just by adding things in Ellie, but by bringing them from, let's say, a data catalog. So let's populate our glossary. And in this case, I'll show you how it works. And we will be using Purview as a data catalog from which we're going to bring entities, business glossary terms into Ellie. So kind of maybe just quickly to cover how the integration works. And the integration will work very similarly also for other catalogs we're bringing connections for, is that there is a UI-based mapping. So you don't need to do any scripting or kind of know how to code. You as an admin of the Ellie organization can set up these things yourself. You can also set up glossary synchronization and make it automated, kind of setting up, for example, I want the tools to sync between each other every hour, every night, every week. And you can set which tool is master. So what we learn with our enterprise customers that you always want to make sure that there's always just one single source of truth. So for each glossary, you can kind of define which of the glossaries is master. Is it the one in Ellie or in the data catalog? And kind of the type of synchronizations we support in these type of integrations are master to destination. So for example, when you're designing a new domain and you're using Ellie for your design work, you can set Ellie as master. And whenever you identify new terms within Ellie, you'll bring them to Purview. But in this case, what I'll show you now is Purview is master. So we have a couple of domains, or we have an enterprise glossary that has already been created in Purview. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it into Ellie. And for that specific glossary, Purview will be the single source of truth. So whenever there are new entities added to Purview, they can also be automatically brought into my Ellie glossary. And I can use them in all my models, of course. And of course, later on, if you start using the integration more and more, you can have set up something like this, where you can have your domain, you can have certain glossaries that you're still designing, where Ellie is mastering your synchronization. You could bring, when the domain is well defined, Purview would be your master. And maybe for some more specific data product designs that are very technical already, that data engineers worked on in a data catalog, you could set Purview as master. But you could bring all this information between the tools and reuse them, and also have that information that, okay, this entity originated from data catalog, for example. So let's go quickly jump to the demo and I'll show you how that looks. So I've already created a couple of connections in my environment. And for example, here I've set Purview as master in my connection. And essentially what I can do here is I can bring glossaries from my Purview into Ellie. So I've selected that the logistics folder should be linked to the logistic glossary in Purview and that our enterprise glossary should be linked to the enterprise glossary in Purview as well. I've then mapped out all the fields. And when that has been done, I have saved all the settings and I essentially fetched all this information from Purview. This case, in this situation, I did manually, but you can also set it up automatically, and I'll just show you how it works. So in our automation settings, you can set which tool is master, whether it's Ellie or the data catalog, in this case, Purview. And then you can basically set how often a synchronization should run. For example, every hour at 0 minutes, and then you can enable the synchronization and it will just happen automatically. So if any new terms are brought into Purview, they automatically go to my enterprise glossary in Ellie, and I don't even have to think about it. If there are any changes to the terms, the definitions have changed, they will automatically change in Ellie as well. And if you want, you can always check the logs to kind of see what changes have been made. So with this workflow, I was able to populate my enterprise glossary. You can see we have a lot of different terms that I can use in my models. And each term also has these external glossary IDs and term IDs, which let me kind of know that what specific term in Purview has been used to sync with the Ellie term. And we also added the descriptions of all the descriptions have also been added. So now with this approach, I was able to add a glossary of my enterprise glossary to Ellie. And also I added a logistics glossary. So it's a domain-specific glossary within my environment. And yeah, with this synchronization, you can basically bring things from your existing data cataloging tools, for example, into Ellie automatically. So now that we're done with that, what do we do next? Well, we're going to create our models. And we're going to add a bit of AI to this workflow, and we're going to do a bit of AI-assisted data modeling, essentially. So essentially, why we built AI functionality for conceptual data modeling in Ellie is that it's often very hard to understand domain experts. We as data people, for example, we are experts in data. And when we talk with somebody who's an expert in healthcare or in sales, they talk in their own terms. They have very specific domain expertise. And because of that, it can be very hard to understand them and kind of capture their business context. But the good news is that large language models, which we're using in this demo, they are great generalists in the sense that they understand a bit of everything. So whether they're talking to a salesperson who's talking about SQLs, they know that it's a sales qualified lead. It has nothing to do about SQL. Or if they talk with I don't know, a marketing person about CTRs, they're pretty good at understanding context. And the idea of this AI modeling is to essentially make it possible for people who maybe don't know yet how to model to kind of express themselves in the data modeling world. You can then use those initial draft models that they have created, and then you can just refine them to kind of make them more complete for a data model. So let's go maybe to a quick demo and let's start creating our first conceptual model, in which I'll also show how our AI functionality works as well. For the sake of the demo, I don't want to pollute our organization. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my personal folder, and in it, I'm going to create a new conceptual model for now. I'll call it Logistics Hub, and we're going to try and create a model for our Logistics Hub for Acme, the company. Let's say we have customers. I'm going to use our enterprise glossary customer entity. We have warehouses, I guess, for the logistics. I'll use the logistics term. And then we have, let's say, orders. And let's use the enterprise glossary order term. So customers make orders. They can make many orders. And then, of course, orders eventually go to a warehouse. This is a very, and many orders can go to one warehouse, let's say for now. Of course, this is a very basic model. For the sake of the demo, let's assume I'm not expert in modeling, and I'll use our little chatbot to help me model this conceptual model further. So I'll say, hey, help me create a conceptual model for our logistics hub. I added a couple of entities already, but maybe you can suggest some more ideas. So now what our chatbot will do, it will look at what is currently available on the canvas, think what is available in the environment as well, and kind of try to suggest what possible entities we could use in this model. And essentially what we did is we taught the bot how to model it themselves. So here it suggested some entities. I'll say, sure, let's add them to the canvas. And now the agent will add them to the canvas and also probably suggest some of the relationships. To save some time, we'll just let it go with the flow and create the entities and relationships as it wishes. Of course, in a real session, I would then probably further refine it and improve it. But it's kind of a great way to model if you've never modeled, or also to brainstorm, because it can suggest you some good entities that you could possibly use in your model. Sure, let's now add the relationships, add them as you see fit. And let's just give it a second. And soon our very early draft of the model will be done, and we'll continue with the process. Yeah, sometimes it takes a little bit of time. It has to think of the relationships, but then it started to add them. And any moment we will have our first version of the model. Okay, so maybe one relationship got missed. So yeah, we'll go for now with this. But the idea is that, it suggests you the first version and you can further refine it. So this is our first version of the model. Let's assume it is done. I'm not really happy that supplier, like this part of the model is of course disconnected, but just to save some time, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna now publish this model from my personal connection into my logistics folder. And now I'll press publish. So some of the terms that were used from other glossaries, like the enterprise glossary when I was creating the model, have been reused. Other ones, for example, I guess warehouse has already existed in the logistics glossary, so it has been reused as well. And now I have my first version of the conceptual model. All right. So what do we do next? Well, we continue modeling, right? We've created our conceptual level model. We now have to create logical and physical. So the cool thing we have in Ellie, which I really love, is our convert functionality. So let's assume the model is complete. Just for the sake of a demo, I will add let me actually add inventory to warehouse relationship. And I'll press auto draw. And let's assume this is our first version of the model. We're now happy with it. I'm going to press the convert button, and I'm going to create a logical model in our logistics. And I'll press convert. And in our logical layer, what we're going to do, maybe kind of to give you some context, is in the conceptual level, this is kind of the layer where you usually work with your domain experts, business people. You try to abstract yourself as much as possible from specific things like attributes or more technical things. You just want to agree on the common things that we need to store data about. When you jump to the logical, you start working with your actual IDs. So for example, our customer entity probably needs a customer ID, and it would probably be a primary key. And essentially here, on top of the relationships you have, you can start working with the attributes, defining primary and foreign keys, but not yet jumping into warehouse-specific data types. And when you're done with this logical model, what you can do is you can create your physical model. So we're going to press again the convert button. I'm going to go to my logistics folder again. and I'm going to create my first version of a physical model. And that's where I will start working with my attributes right further. So I would actually work with the data types, etc. Uh, this work would probably take a little bit of time. So what I did is I created a model already just to show you how it would look in the end. But the idea here is that, you can start defining warehouse specific attributes, add constraints like unique or not null, and then define relationships between your physical entities, the actual table. So if you have primary and foreign keys, this is the way you can define the relationships between them. Let's assume I am done. I don't know, we've had some discussion with some people. Let's try to finish this model. And let's say we finished the model now. So what do we do next? I'll show you how a model actually looks. So let's say we've had somebody from the data team actually added all the attributes, and now a model looks something like this. All the lines are correct. There are no errors or red lines because the primary and foreign keys have not been defined. So we now have a somewhat ready view of our warehouse design schema. So what do we do next? We have a continuous workflow, and let's go quickly through it. So in this case, I'll show you how we work with the Microsoft Fabric Stack, but the same can be applied also for Snowflake and also other systems in the future as well. So the core integration specifically for Microsoft is, as I mentioned, we have the Purview integration, so we can sync between the glossaries of the tools. Once we've created our new design of a physical model in Ellie and we all agree on it, we can then, through version control, push it to Azure DevOps. A data engineer could then, for example, actually build these structures in Fabric. But as a part of this process, they might have realized, okay, we need to add a certain attribute or something was missing. They can make those changes. And once it's done in Fabric, we can always bring it back to Ellie, and then we can always compare what was our initial design and what was the actual end implementation and see if some things were missing. So let's look quickly at the Fabric workflow as part of the demo. And I've already set up in my connectors Azure DevOps integration. So it's kind of like version control. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my model that I just shown you, like the SQL ready model. And when the model is ready, there are no errors. The primary and foreign keys have been defined. The cool part is that while you design, once you finished it, we can actually create SQL code for you. So I'm going to press the Generate SQL button, and we can see that for my physical model, we actually created a DDL statement that we can now use. And you can use it in a couple of ways. You could just copy it to your worksheet and paste it in the worksheet. But because we want to go through the version control, we want somebody to still check it to make sure that everything is fine. We're going to use our Azure DevOps integration. So I'm going to press on the push to Azure DevOps. I already selected my branch, Acme demo. Let's put it to the root directory. Logistics Hub demo is our file name. And I'm going to push this SQL file to my repository. So if I go to my Azure DevOps repository and I'll refresh, we should have a file show up any moment. Yeah, so this one, Logistics Hub Demo SQL. So this is the model we created in Ellie, and we pushed it to our version control. So now the next step would, of course, be to create an actual structure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this code. Usually, I would probably do it in Visual Studio, but instead, what I'll do is, for now, just open a notebook in my Fabric. I will paste this create table statements, and I'm going to create these tables in my Lakehouse. So let me just make sure the workspace is set correct. And maybe just for the sake of a demo, because this is usually what happens in a real environment, maybe somebody during when a data engineer took over the design, they realized maybe something was missing, like a certain attribute. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add to my create statement an additional attribute. Let's say it's a string. I'll delete the unnecessary comma. And now I'm going to run my create table statements. And that's kind of the cool part of this whole workflow, right? as you design an Ellie, we actually create workable code that you can then use within your, in this case, Fabric environment. We also support Snowflake and others to come. All right. So currently these tables are being created. It's going to take sometimes it takes a couple of minutes, but let's see, usually it's quicker. And then what we're going to do next is once the tables are created, we're actually going to pull them back into Ellie, and then we'll be able to basically see the difference. So, okay, we have our actual design that we created, so that we designed in Ellie, and then the one that was actually built at the end of the day in the lake house. So I think, I see. Yeah, just a second. I think I selected a wrong lake house. So yeah, because I already created these tables. Let me quickly create a new lake house just for the sake of the demo. Just a second. Let me create a new lake house. But then the idea is that inside of it, I could create these tables. And let me just open a new notebook. I'll create a new notebook. Let me put it to Spark SQL. And now I will again copy the code, paste it here. Again, let's add an extra attribute to one of our tables just for the sake of the demo. Let's say name, just for the sake of it. And let's say it's a string. All right. And now I'm going to run it again. And it will take a minute or two to create. And because of that, what I'm going to do is I'll just show you the one I created previously. So let me go to my organization. I'll go back to the logistics and I'll create a new physical model. Let's call it logistics hub actual implementation. I'll connect to the database. In this case, it will be the Fabric one. I'll add my credentials. Now I'm going to select my database Acme. And I'll select the schema in which we were working. And now essentially what it's going to do is it's going to bring, okay, so I think the table actually wasn't created. Let me do, yeah, so something is wrong with my lake house, but it's okay. I'll show you with another demo, no problem. So let me connect. Yeah.
Dan,
Yes.
Michael has a possible solution in the chat. He says you need to rename the order ID column you duplicated.
Yeah.
Well, I
So
think you had initially had a column duplicated with duplicate name.
yeah, I know which, yeah, exactly. So let me, yeah, I think I forgot to change the name. You are correct. Let's actually go back to our previous lake house then. Good catch. Yeah. So we'll go back here. Yeah, I think this is the error. Yeah, okay, makes sense. Let's say its name and let's try to run it again. But it should work otherwise. It's always funny how the demo effects happen, right? I tested in the morning, everything works great. But then I guess because I added the duplicate attribute name, there was an error. But all right, let's wait it for to run. And we will try the same demo really quickly once again. I think we're still good on time. So let me go to my environment again. I'll go to our logistics and I will create again logistics hub actual database design, let's call it. We're going to connect, use the Fabric connector, and I will connect to the same environment. Let's select the Acme, choose the DBO schema, and let's just see if it's now still running. Yeah, I think it has succeeded. Good catch, Michael. Thank you for the help. Let me just go to the right environment, and now I'm going to press confirm. And essentially, we're going to bring it Okay, for some reason, I don't know why it doesn't load. Let me try and find, because I tested it today. I'll just show you how it looks. I know, I think I deleted it. All right. Let me see if I have the model still. No, I don't think I do. I'll just load another model just for the sake of the demo. We seem to have issues with my specific Fabric environment, but I'll just show you how you can reverse a model back into Ellie, just to show you how it works in practice. I guess something is wrong with my lakehouse, but just to save time, I'll just show you how it would work otherwise. So I'm going to connect to an existing database, and I'll connect to a schema and bring it into Ellie. So essentially what we do is, of course, if there are existing relationships in the schema, they will be brought back. What I wanted to show you is that while in my original logistics design, I had relationships, when we would bring something back from Lakehouse, we would realize that all relationships are gone because Lakehouse just doesn't support relationships within the Lakehouse. And we would also see the new attribute that I have added, and it would be shown in the model. So the idea is that currently you can compare within Ellie kind of the final design and what you were planning to do. But in the future, you will also be able to visually see the differences between them. All right. Let's continue with the demo. I guess the main idea with what I wanted to show is that we enable the whole workflow, right? You can start by gathering context from your people. You can then create your conceptual, create your logical, your physical models, give them to the data engineer. They would actually create them in your data warehouse, and you can bring the final designs back into Ellie and compare, and always have one place where you have the documentation of design and the actual implementation at the end of the day. The next thing I wanted to go through quickly is our roadmap to kind of show what are we going to do in the coming months. And I'll explain some of these topics in the next demo. So in the last couple of months, we added the folders and subglossary support. We've been working a lot on different connectors like Azure DevOps, Purview integration. We're working currently on Colibra. There are other integrations in place with different warehouses like Fabric and Snowflake. And the thing we're going to focus quite a lot in the beginning of the next year is how to kind of sync models between, especially if they're on different levels. Let's say you added an attribute in a logical entity, you probably want to make sure that if it's important, that it's also to your physical designs, for example. And we're going to be working a lot on this model synchronization. We're also looking into enabling the reuse of entities, not just in conceptual level, but also in other levels of models within Ellie. Recently, we added model versioning. So we have different versions of the model. And when you edit a model, you can see you can always see the previous versions of the model. And now we're currently adding entity versioning the same way. So if somebody makes a change in definition, you can always go and check the previous version of the definition. We'll be working a lot also on making metadata fields in Ellie much more customizable, allowing you to basically make them of different types. You'll be able to have them as objects like you would have in data catalogs. So one metadata field could have multiple synonyms, for example, or source systems as objects. And you'll be able to work with metadata fields, not just and customize them, not just in the glossary, but also within your models, folders, etc. And there's going to be a lot more we're working on, like reusable entities, dimensional modeling. We still plan to add enterprise view, but we're still thinking how to do it properly. And there's going to be a lot of work also on our new workflow that we're currently working on called the source system workflow. And that's the next thing I want to talk about. And this is our public roadmap. Of course, things might change, but this is kind of where we plan to go in the coming months. All right, so let's look at the source system workflow. So this is something that we are still experimenting with a lot, but we hope to have another webinar in a couple of months and show you what it is all about in much more practice. But we want to share it with you already because, you might be interested in it. And we're, of course, looking for customers who would want to try it out as soon as possible with us, kind of in beta phase. So the idea is that, okay, so as I showed in our previous in what we were just doing, with the top-down design, you can gather the business context, create your conceptual model, logical, physical, even create your new reference design, schema designs in an actual warehouse. But then the question is, okay, but where do we find this data? And how do we actually validate our designs, that we actually have the data that we thought of in our design, that the business needs in certain report, etc. And that's kind of where the whole source system workflow comes in. This is a bit of a still work in progress, but I just wanted to explain how it works. So as we just went through, the idea is that on one side, you can create top-down your physical data model design, for example. But on the other side, and I'll show you a bit of demos in a bit, is you'll be able to connect to over 150 different source systems through Ellie, whether it's SAP or DB2 or other more legacy systems, or even modern ones like Snowflake and Fabric, of course, or Databricks. You'll be able to bring these tables from these source systems into Ellie as kind of raw sources. And then using our AI engine, I showed it to some of attendees here already, but you'll be able to basically generate synthetic metadata for these tables. Now, of course, a lot of tables from your sources are not very well documented or not documented at all. And it would be, in many cases, like there's thousands of tables, it would be impossible to go through all of them, or yeah. So what we're trying to do is using AI kind of generate synthetic metadata and kind of explain what type of data you can find in each table, how you could possibly use it, a specific column row, for example. And then we're going to let you connect and reference these sources with your physical data models. We're going to experiment a lot with vector-based AI search for this. So we could look at all the semantics on the kind of your top-down designs, compare it to the semantics of the sources and the synthetic metadata we generate, and try to kind of help you find which tables you could use as reference for your new database designs. As a first thing we'll do is we'll let you basically reference them yourself, and the next iteration will be AI assisted. So you could, for example, take a source table from HubSpot and link your employee ID to a certain employee ID in your new sales operations physical data model. You could bring also stuff, reference something from Salesforce, Workday, or any other systems that we support. And I'll show you which ones we'll support in a second. And maybe we can actually jump into the demos. So first, I'll show you how can we bring information into Ellie. So I'm going to go and create a new physical model just to quickly show you what type of systems we support. I'm going to connect to a database, and I'm going to use our partner integration with CData Cloud Connect. And I already have a couple of existing connectors. So I'll first show you how we can, for example, connect to Databricks. And essentially, as I connect to Databricks, whatever is available in my Databricks environment, I can bring it into Ellie. Just a sec, Databricks. It's funny, this is the only connector we have issue with. It works every second time for some reason, but here you go. And yeah, we're basically able to import information from Databricks as models into Ellie, so as tables into Ellie. We're also able to, if needed, look at sample data to generate synthetic metadata for this. So this is just one example, but let me go and try to create another model. I will again use the Cloud Connect, and I'll create a new connection. And these are essentially, let me just zoom in so you see better. These are essentially all the systems that we can now connect to right within Ellie. And you can bring information or tables basically from them into Ellie as metadata. So there's SAP tables, there is Microsoft Dynamics, more legacy systems like DB2 or Oracle. And kind of the idea is to make Ellie one place where you can store all your source system information, you can work with your new designs, and you can reference them together. So you can work in tandem with like things you already have, your new designs, compare what you can use for them, etc. So this is part one, is of course bringing the data in. And then I'm going to quickly show you how we can also create synthetic metadata for your source tables. So I just brought in COVID-19 data. I got it from Snowflake. So this is like public data set of COVID-19 data available on the Snowflake marketplace. And essentially what I did here is I was able to use our AI agent to generate synthetic metadata. So it looked at it took 1,000 sample rows of data for each of these tables, and everything that you'll see in blue is AI generated here. So we can see that the table name was pretty hard to understand, but actually it is country daily reports. Each record represents COVID-19 related statistics for a specific country or on a particular date. So we get like a really good description of what the data is about in this table. And then for each column row, we also get information like description of each column row. And we also add logical groups, which give you indicators that you could possibly split this table further and normalize it further to specific logical groups like geographic location, temporal information, COVID-19 statistics, etc. And with the help of all this information, AI agents are pretty good at finding possible tables you could, source system tables you could use for your project. Just for the sake of demo, of course, we're just in one little environment, but we're just in one little data set. But I'll show you, for example, you can ask the chatbot, which tables could I use to see how many beds we have available during a specific date based on the amount of COVID-19 cases at the time. And essentially our AI agent will look at the tables available. In this case, I'm just showing, one schema, but it will be able to look at, all the schemas, all the tables you have you have brought to the environment. And it will be able to suggest which tables you could use for a certain thing. In this case, it's of course just like a specific task, but it will look at your new physical model design and do the exact same job, right? Suggest which from where you could connect data to certain attributes of tables, for example. While we wait, I think we're getting close to our Q&A session. So I think this is all I wanted to show overall. I hope this session gave you a lot of ideas. And Sami, maybe you can take over and do the final slides. But yeah, it, for example, here suggested which specific tables we could use for a specific analysis. And the only reason it does it so well is because of all this synthetic metadata, because otherwise it's quite hard to guess what tables are about. But because our AI agent is able to look at real sample data from the tables, it is able to do pretty good educated guesses of how to use these tables and what each column row is about. So yeah, I think that is the end of my part. Sami, you want to take over?
Yeah, we're actually, yeah, if you can think you have the final slide.
Yeah.
If you don't mind. Yeah, and we're experimenting with a lot of different Gen AI models right now, because sometimes the Anthropic's Claude Sonnet 3.5 might be great for something. Sometimes OpenAI would be better for something like GPT-4o, and so forth. So different models, different purposes. But anyways, so the way we are seeing the future is that this is kind of where we are today. In the approach is that we're a little bit of an island when we do this kind of enterprise data product modeling in the middle. And we obviously have source systems and target systems for people, and then there's these data engineering pipelines done with Talent, Informatica, DBT, all kinds of tools. And what we're now working really hard on is to, if you extend it one click, is to extend into this AI-assisted source navigator. Essentially, it's a way of creating understanding of what you already have. So in a case of, we've heard now many times is that, companies get acquired. So suddenly we have Microsoft Dynamics that comes in from an acquired company, and we need to figure out how to integrate their data sets into our data vault, data lake, whatever platform approach methodology we use. So we'll be able to bring that really in a good way for you, and then use the AI tools again to help you pick up the entities that you want to model against. Now, the next step, kind of logical next step from there, is that we'll start helping you more and more with this AI-assisted target modeling. Is like, which tables could I use for this particular purpose? Which tables I should look to normalize or denormalize? We can go both ways in this modeling approach. And in many cases nowadays, we like to essentially create this one big table, like very wide tables for reporting purposes. So the AI can help you figure out which dimensions are needed so that we could denormalize them. And then the logical next step is essentially going a little bit further with this SQL creation or whatever system we'll use to build those pipelines. This last part, what is very, very important is that we're not going to replicate what DBT does or what Informatica does. We're not going to get into the ETL tool market or ELT market at all. But what we are looking to do is help with the data engineers to execute simple tasks. You know, because we know the data lineage from the source into the new model into the target. It's quite straightforward for many of the transformations, particularly if it's just denormalizing, for instance, and creating one large table. We can create the SQL, and then somebody will take a look at it, validate it, maybe write some additional transformations if they are needed. But essentially, the idea is that we could potentially save 60% of the data engineers' time in a lot of the mundane tasks. So that's kind of where we are. So we're really trying to turn Ellie into a modeling-centric tool that can help in various use cases, and essentially it can help more types of users, not just the architects, but also analytics teams as well as the engineering teams and so forth. So that's kind of where we are headed. And maybe we'll go to Q&A because we have a couple of good questions. I think I answered one already on the Q&A. But
All right.
So
Perfect.
let's see. I think Ian asked about, will you add support for domains in addition to data types for attributes?
I
think that, Stan, that's good for you.
Yeah, let me just see. Will you add support for domains in addition to data types for attributes? So I'm just thinking, like, what does it mean in a sense that would you like to set a specific attribute, like would you like to set that an attribute belongs only to one specific domain, or?
Yeah, that's basically correct, Stan. It's like it's using strong typing. Some database systems have support either for aliasing existing types or for creating user-defined types. But in any event, in the logical space and conceptual space, applying domain constraints to attributes is quite good documentation mechanism.
Yeah, so we don't have it yet on the roadmap, but I think overall, fundamentally, how we look at 2025, then the things we're going to build, right, is that what we learned is that every enterprise does things just very differently, right? And there are certain things that are very important in some case, and in others they're not. But our job is to basically make sure that you can customize the environment in Ellie that fits your specific enterprise purpose. And that's why what I mentioned as kind of one part of our roadmap is we will let you kind of customize metadata further and be able to predefine it. So you could set like there's only 5 specific source systems you can select, etc. So there will be more customizable. And as we're doing that more and more, we'll also be able to maybe let you do more with the attributes. So currently you can add different kind of attribute columns. So if you ask us, we can add like additional attribute settings for you. But in the future, you'll be able to add it yourself, and you'll be also able to modify them. So they won't be just like a text input, but you will be able to say like a predefined set of data types as something to choose, for example. So I think it would solve it. Probably that's how we could solve the problem for you. So you would be able to kind of define those additional restrictions yourself within the tool as an admin.
Okay, thank you.
All right. And then there's a question from, I guess Michael was just suggesting the issue I had a problem with. Robert Koch, if I want a physical dimensional model, should the logical model then be modeled in a dimensional way also? It is really up to you, I would say. You can do dimensional modeling in the warehouse specific design of physical models or in the logical, but we could also connect you to my colleague Hanno, who's more like expert on these things, and he can also give you some advice. Jeffrey Giles asks about data governance workflow handled. So we are entering the data governance world kind of one step at a time. We actually never planned Ellie to become like a data catalog in any sense, right? But as we're building more and more things within Ellie, it slowly becomes this sort of a lightweight catalog. So the
Lightweight,
main
yeah.
things, yeah, very lightweight, but so the
The-
main things,
The main thing I was interested in is that, in your structure of, let's say, go from conceptual, which generates many logicals, one logical can generate many physicals. At each point in that transition, can you control who is the one that gets to drive that model to the next flow or the next level? Or can anybody do it? And how do you maintain that kind of control within that data model lifecycle?
yeah, great question. So currently you cannot restrict models themselves, right? Who has write access. But what you can do is you can restrict it on a folder level. So for example, let's say in logistics, let's assume everybody in logistics can edit the models. But what I could do is I could create a specific folder for, let's say, a specific data product, right? Data product 1. And in that specific data product, I could restrict the folder. So I could make sure that, let's say, only Mark Simmons has write access there. And in that case, only Mark Simmons is basically able to modify the physical model created in this folder. So through the folders themselves, you can kind of restrict who can edit certain things. So for example, in the enterprise glossary, we've said that only admins can edit the enterprise glossary because this glossary actually comes directly from Purview, and technically nobody should change it. But you could also, for a specific, if you have a specific project in mind with a specific physical model, you could bring it to a restricted folder where only the people you would want would be able to edit it. In the future, we plan to also add asset-specific restrictions, but currently we're working on folder level restrictions. Does that answer your question, Jeffrey?
It does. It leads me to another question, which I think I saw in your roadmap, which was reuse of model object. And as we know, model object can mean different things in different contexts. So if I had a customer, let's say in sales, and I have customer, let's say finance, sales is somebody interested in buying something. Finance says you actually did buy something. So the term customer is the same. The context is different. So the definition is different. So am I creating more metadata, or am I having metadata that I can define in a different context if I was looking for show me everything that has customer associated with it?
Yeah, so the way we work in that regard, so let's say, well, we can try simulating that specific. So let's say we are in sales and we have, and I guess we're running out of time, but I'm happy to stay a bit longer to answer the questions. So let's say we have a customer, and customer in sales would have a certain definition, right? Person or company that buys from us. In logistics case, if I work with a conceptual model, I could still use my customer definition from sales and marketing. But if I realize that this definition just doesn't fit for me, because in logistics, it's maybe something different, what I can always do is I can either create a logistics specific entity or use the one that already exists, but I can also like do this, we call it clone feature. So it will take all the metadata that I have created in my sales and marketing customer entity and create a copy. Well, in this case, I already have an entity, but essentially you can have multiple versions of the customer entity, right? So one can be specific for logistics, one can be specific for sales, and one can be your enterprise glossary one. So it would be like the main one. So you would always recommend to reuse that one. But if it doesn't fit for a specific case, you can then create a domain specific entity with its own definition.
All right. So there's like a namespace so they don't collide.
They don't collide because they exist kind of in different folders, right? So this customer
Right. So
is
the
sales
folder
and
is the one
marketing.
that's that's what sets up your differentiator between these different areas that you're modeling.
Exactly. So you can always, for each folder, you can have one customer, you could say. And you can also have a folder with no glossary of its own for a specific case, but usually you would have your own glossary if you wish.
Yeah. Okay.
And multiple of ways of inheriting. Yep.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to figure out, is what is the abstraction of an object?
And Jeffrey, honestly, when I'm looking at your questions, if you don't mind, we'd love to talk to you more as we improve our metadata, the approach how we deal with metadata. It would be really interesting to talk, because we've been running into these questions about different standards as well before and how we support them. So it would be really cool to hear your
more than
your
happy
perspective.
to talk to you about things you could do with this. It's a very good tool.
Yeah. Awesome.